My name is Christine Lee and I am from New England. I was born in Hong Kong, but my family moved to the States when I was about 4. My parents moved us to New Hampshire specifically when I was almost in 4th grade for my dad to plant a Chinese church. And so I've grown up in and around faith, but I would say I didn't really make my faith my own until about high school. And that was around the same time that I began feeling drawn into vocational ministry. So after high school, I ended up going to Bible college, and that was a time where that sense of calling just grew and grew, that I was not just made for the Lord, but I was made for the church in a lot of ways. And after I finished college, I ended up going to work for a church in the Midwest. It was a mega church, and there were parts of it that I really loved. I loved that I got to work with students and their families, and there was just something so meaningful about getting to be a part of these kids' lives in such a formative period of time, and also see them grow and become and experience who Jesus is together. But there was also this thing behind the scenes that made it so hard, and there was just this environment that was so much about control and secrets. And I think as time went on, I found it harder and harder to figure out how to live in that tension of really loving the work I got to do with the people of the church, and at the same time finding the things happening underneath the surface in the system of the church being a lot about power and not really having words for it, and feeling like if I didn't act a certain way, if I didn't look a certain way, if I didn't avoid asking certain questions, that there would be really severe consequences. And over time, that started really taking a toll on my mental health. I ended up moving across the country to the West Coast to work at a different church, and I felt really hopeful about that. But shortly after starting there, I felt like I started seeing the same things behind the scenes. I took a 6-month break because I was just trying to gather myself, like maybe I've gotten a lot of this wrong and I really want to make sure I land in a good spot. And I found a church in the southwest of the country that, I was very honest with about some of the things I'd been through, and they really promised me that they were different, and they shared that they cared so much about diversity and about trauma, and that really drew me to it. But after I got there, it just seemed like a lot of the things that were happening in the system were very similar to some of my previous experiences. And I think maybe because of the things I'd already been through, my capacity to cope was just a lot lower, and that environment wore me down a lot quicker. And I just found it harder and harder every day to get out of bed, and eventually I started having suicidal thoughts. And I told the people that I worked with there about it, but I didn't really get very much help. And when my time there ended, I was fired by one of the leaders of the church, and essentially for having depression. And he told me that if ministry was so tough on my mental health, that maybe I should check myself into an institution, and that I wasn't really cut out for it. I kind of left that space really devastated and not really knowing what to do with myself. And the pandemic had just started, so I moved back to New Hampshire in with my parents, and I really didn't know what was next. I just knew I couldn't keep doing what I had done. For a while there, I felt really lost. I felt really alone, and I felt like I didn't really know what to do with what I felt like God wanted from me. I didn't know what it meant for me to be a part of the church when the church had taken so many things from me that I felt like I was never going to be able to get back. During this time in my life, I serendipitously got connected with a guy named Drew from Renaissance, and got to know more folks from this community. And I think the first thing I noticed was just how humble everybody was and gentle. And it felt like there wasn't really anything to defend, there wasn't really anything to control, and there wasn't really anything to prove. As I felt that, at first, I think I didn't really know what to do with it, because I was just so not used to that, and I still had so many things to sort out in my own life. But over time, I just found this community to be full of so many people who are deeply trustworthy and love Jesus, not just with their words, but with their lives. And I got the privilege of beginning some microchurches. One is called the Manchester Project. We meet in each other's homes in southern New Hampshire, and the other is called Open Table, and it is a digital monthly group that is for folks who are struggling with faith, doubts, and have been really harmed by religious organizations. And it has been so transformative for my life. I think that one of the biggest surprises for me is how church feels safe again, and I kind of never thought that that would happen. And there's so much about what it looks like to follow Jesus with a group of people that are not looking to control anything and truly believing that God has agency and He's working in the world, and we can trust Him, we can trust what He's doing, and we can look for what He's doing and just feel His invitation and step in the best that we can. I think for me, a lot of the pressure of church to be a certain way, to do a certain thing, to avoid asking certain things, and then also to pretend to be okay when you're not, that has been lifted. And as I've been journeying with the microchurches I'm a part of, I feel so deeply rooted in the love of Christ. This thing that doesn't need to defend itself, it doesn't have anything to prove, it just is. And I find myself looking for beauty all around me in ways that I never did before. And so now I live back in my home state, really in my hometown, and I work for a tech company full-time. I'm a part-time therapist, and I find these roles so fulfilling in ways I couldn't have imagined. I feel like each day I am exposed to beautiful people that I learn so much from, and I'm looking for Christ and His work in the world everywhere. And I'm so grateful for Renaissance, for the way that this community has made space for me to heal, made space for me to be myself, has not asked me to be less than I am, and has not asked me to be more than I could be in the moment. And I feel like in that I have experienced the grace of God.